But it was largely because I was told to go to the I felt guilty not doing something that was
Yeah. Fear of missing out. I do too. Yeah, I think we're gonna get them seated. Yes. Trisha, we're gonna get some in a second. You wanna grab? Actually, we're gonna have you guys sit in the front row.
Right there. And I'll just sit too.
Yeah, you're good. Okay. I know there's a dead spot somewhere around here. Hey, everybody. Can everybody in the back hear me? Yes? Thumbs up. Great. Welcome to our event tonight. Thank you all for coming. We may have some stragglers coming in, but we will be very welcoming to them as well. So thank you for coming. I want to point this out because Ankit and I, we scoured the internet for this picture with all welcome in many different languages. We actually Googled many of them to make sure that it actually said welcome. That was a key thing to do there. All right, so this is Changing the Paradigm, Female Trailblazers in Tech, just so you know you're in the right location. I am Sean Duffy. I'm with MakerSquare, and we're hosting this event tonight. You're going to hear from our managing director about our program, what we do, and then following that we'll have our amazing panel. So before we get into that, I want to thank a few people without whom this event would not be possible. Capital Factory, obviously, they provide us with the space for our meetups. They're a really great partner for both MakerSquare and another meetup group that I run called EdTech Austin. So love Capital Factory and always appreciate their support. Also, a huge thank you to our panelists. This was a really fun event to put together, and I actually have learned so much in the building of the event. And I've learned a lot about our awesome panelists, and I can't wait to hear their thoughts on tonight's topic. Thank you especially to Katie and Danny. Katie Stover and Danny Wilson-Burdett, who's our awesome moderator for tonight. They were great in putting all this together, so everything from the questions to the format. So I hope you guys enjoy. And thank you also to you all for being here tonight. I really always appreciate the crowd in the room, and I know it's going to be a great discussion, and I look forward to hearing from you all. If you are so inclined, we do have some Twitters set up for you. So I always find myself at meetups kind of explaining how Twitter works, so bear with me. But I do think it's a great way to kind of see what other people are saying about a subject. So if you want to use the hashtag WomenTechATX, that way, any time tonight, if you have an idea or a thought you want to share, we'll be able to go back and look at all that. If not, no big deal, but just wanted to put that out there. So yeah, that's bottom thing will stay up there for a couple more slides, so don't freak out if you don't have it written down. And also, MakerSquare ATX is our local hashtag for MakerSquare. Our agenda, welcome and intros, so we're still pretty much on time, which is good. We will do our panelist introductions and just kind of some background on the event and maybe some ground rule type stuff. Following that, we will do our Q&A, our panel and Q&A. As Danny will explain, there is a lot of opportunity for audience participation, so I hope that you have some thoughtful questions for our panel. After that, we'll do open networking. We do have the space until 9 o'clock, but it's totally up to you how long you want to stick around. I hope you'll use the time for networking, for further discussion, and kind of like our takeaways and next steps. All right. So without going too much over our time and staying on schedule, I would like to introduce Ankit Patel, who is the managing director of MakerSquare.
Thank you, Sean. And hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? Fantastic. Awesome. Well, again, I want to echo Sean's words on thanking everyone for being here. Welcome. We're really excited to have our panelists here and open up this discussion around women in technology and the closing the gender gap. So before we start introducing our panelists, I want to take a quick moment to talk about MakerSquare, who we are, what we do, why we believe topics around diversity is very important for us, and why we believe that it should be important for everyone, whether you're an engineer, entrepreneur, or a parent or a teacher. So how many of you guys have heard of MakerSquare or know what MakerSquare does? Okay, so it looks like most people. Okay, so bear with me for those. I'll try to explain to those who are not familiar with MakerSquare. We are a 3-month software engineering career accelerator. So you can think of us as an entity that crafts software engineers. So before I go too much into what our offerings are, I want to actually start by explaining why we do what we do. And it really comes down to us wanting to change how education is delivered. And we do that through a world-class curriculum that's focused around JavaScript and gaining JavaScript expertise. And we deliver a mixture of instructor-led, project-based, and peer learning. And at MakerSquare, our students unleash creativity and naturally learn to work together as a team to solve practical challenges. And we believe in this notion of rapid iteration. We are always trying to improve our programs, whether it be our curriculum or our student experience. And lastly, we want to make a positive and lasting impact. We want to help change people's lives, help change people's career directions to pursue their passions, and we want to have fun doing it. And ultimately, we know that our students' success is going to be our success. So let me quickly go over what we offer at MakerSquare. So our core offering is our immersive program that I mentioned, which is a 3-month program. And it's on-site. We're actually located on the 5th floor of Capitol Factory. And students come on-site for 3 months, spend 11 hours a day, 6 days a week in this intense learning environment, ramp up their technical and soft skills. And we are an outcomes-focused school. That means that students that graduate from MakerSquare are going to go out and take on mid-level and sometimes senior-level software engineering roles. Other thing I did want to mention before I continue to talk about our immersive program is that we also have a part-time course called Maker Prep, which is geared towards people who have little or no programming experience. So these are people who may want to consider going into an immersive program, whether it be with MakerSquare or another company, but we help them accelerate their learning in programming. So talk a little bit more about the immersive program. We provide a strong peer group learning environment. That means that anyone who comes in to our program, they're guaranteed to be surrounded by people or peers who are going to be passionate and motivated, strongly collaborative, and also technically proficient. And this kind of starts at our admissions process. We have a very competitive admissions process. We make sure that not only that the student is a right fit for the program, but also that the program is a right fit for the student and their goals. Lifelong career services and coaching support. So this is a big one for us. Usually so our program is 3 months long, and the relationship that we build with our students, it doesn't end after those 3 months. It actually is lifelong, and we're very serious about that. So a student can come back to us 2 years from now and say, hey, I've been doing back-end development for a year or two, but I'd really like to step up my game and move into a more full-stack developer role. So they can come back to us, and we'll help coach them through that transition process. And what's really cool is that we actually have a hiring network of nearly 300 companies, which are relationships that we've built with software engineering teams all across the US. So we have these warm leads already built with these companies that we can easily connect our alumni with. We are licensed by the Texas Workforce Commission as a career school. And just to give you a few facts about our outcomes, 96% of our graduates get a job as a software engineer within 3 months. And some of you might be wondering what happens to the other 4%. And within 6 months, we have 100% placement rate. And our average starting salary in Austin is $75,000. LA is 96, and SF is 106. And I forgot to mention, we actually have 3 schools. So first one that was started was in Austin. So we are an Austin-based company. And last year, we opened a school in San Francisco. And then this year, we opened one in LA. So at MakerSquare, we're really trying to create a diverse and inclusive workforce. There was actually a study that I read, and it revealed that when you have a diverse workforce, not only is it that those individuals who quote unquote are diverse contribute something unique to the team, or rather everyone contributes something unique to the team. So people tend to act differently when they're in a diverse group than they do when they're in a group of people that are just like themselves. And that's why creating a diverse workforce is so important and critical to a team and culture success. We also are trying to change an industry that's rather been monotone. Our students come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Probably over half of them don't actually have a CS degree. They've never had roles in the industry as a software engineer. And so they come from different fields of studies or careers prior to them coming to MakerSquare. So if you can imagine, we bring all these people together, train them to be software engineers, and we send them out into the industry. They have new ideas and fresh perspectives on a lot of things that students who may just go through the traditional four-year college degree and go into the software engineering, they have different perspective, different approaches to how they solve problems. And we're also trying to help address the gender gap in our student demographics. And that kind of starts with us having these type of discussions in this room today. And one of the things that we're doing here in Austin is we're offering a Women in Technology Scholarship. So we're offering a $500 scholarship to women. We're trying to encourage more women to pursue their interest in computer science or technology. So the scholarship would be used towards their tuition for the offerings in Austin, MakerSquare Austin. And currently we're enrolling in our two programs, the Maker Prep and our Immersive. So for Maker Prep, we have a course coming up in January and February. And for Immersive, our January cohort is actually full, but we are enrolling currently for February and April. So I want to encourage all of you guys, if you know anyone who could benefit from a program like MakerSquare, or even just wants to chat about immersive programs and coding boot camps to see if it's a good fit for them, please send them our way. They can apply directly at mks.io/womenintech. Thank you all, and looking forward to the discussion.
All right, so, and I will also send out a short blurb in an email that y'all will get after tonight's event. So we'll have the link in there as well. Okay, so with that said, I am really looking forward to this discussion and our moderator for tonight. I found out actually we have kind of a common thread, which is really cool. Danielle Wilson-Burnett, former Teach for America teacher, currently with Game Salad, and our common thread is that we both started a STEM program. I was a classroom teacher. I taught high school English and then brought on broadcast journalism and STEM. And so we were talking about that yesterday and kind of going over some of the questions. So really cool to have another educator and person who can speak to the STEM needs in our community. So with that, I bring up Danielle Wilson-Burnett.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get all of our panelists up here so they can get comfy, and then we'll do a couple of intro things and let you know how this is going to go. But let's get to those questions because you don't want to hear me talk forever. So our first panelist is Ashley McKemmy. Sorry. She is a data engineer at Datafinity, and she is also a MakerSquare graduate. Our next panelist is Trisha McTaggart, and she is a web engineer at Mutual Mobile. She's also the co-founder of ATX Diversity Hack and the co-director of Women Who Code Austin. She's very connected in all of the in a lot of student tech organizations here too. So our next panelist is Mokshika Sharma, and she is the CEO and co-founder of Tastegraphy, who has an awesome app called Tasty. And she studied electrical and computer engineering here at UT Austin. So we have some more traditional paths for women in tech and some that are a little bit more non-traditional. And then last but not least, we have Karen Lewis, who is a software engineer at BlackLocus, and she is also a MakerSquare graduate. So once they get up here and get comfy, let's do this guy. No. Sean.
Go to the other, there's like 2 buttons.
I know, I'm pushing the other one hard as I can, I promise.
A panel on tech would not be complete without
I
tech.
know. Oh, there we go. Thanks. Okay, so again, thank you all so much for being here. We are kind of the format of this is we're going to do some questions for our panelists that I've prepared and Katie helped prepare. And then we are going to break for a quick Q&A with the audience. Then we'll do some more questions, and at the end do another Q&A. So if you have something that pops into your mind as we're talking about the things that we bring up, definitely keep those in mind. And then also, just to kind of set the stage, we of course want to have a productive conversation tonight, a friendly conversation, and want to make sure that everybody knows we're not trying to overgeneralize about every single woman in tech, because obviously the 5 of us cannot represent every woman in tech in Austin or anywhere. But we want to give some insight based on our personal experience. And lastly, there are a few statistics that we are going to be bringing up, and those are all from a white paper that I believe Sean sent out to you, and we can send it again in the follow-up email. But it's a Google white paper called Women Who Choose Computer Science, What Really Matters, and that's kind of the resource that we were basing our statistics off of tonight. So, without further ado, let's get to the skin. And also, here's y'all's mic, so I might want to pass back and forth. All right, so the first question for all of our panelists is if you will just kind of tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis and why you are here tonight to talk about women in tech.
Okay, I don't think it should be. Is this working? It doesn't sound like it's working. Okay now?
Yeah.
All right, tech. Awesome. So, okay, I'm a data engineer at a company, a local startup in Austin called Datafinity. Essentially what we do is get publicly available data from the internet and clean it up, bundle it up, and sell it to clients, typically businesses, certain ones including like HomeAway and stuff like that. So primarily my role now is to take data that does not look very pretty, and lots of it, and make it look pretty. And a lot of that includes building internal tools and a lot of tracking of our data. So I guess they did mention that I went to MakerSquare, and my focus was back end. So I was really more interested in learning that rather than design and front end stuff. So a lot of the stuff I do right now is building currently I'm working on building an API in Java, and then reworking some internal tools like that also in Java. So that's kind of primarily what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Perfect, thank you.
Hello, my name is Trisha McTaggart. I am a web engineer at Mutual Mobile. I work in full stack development, so both front end and back end. My previous career before getting into tech was in the oil and gas industry. I'm originally from Texas. If anybody's from Houston, very easy to end up in the oil and gas industry. So previously came from oil and gas and finance, made the move to tech. While I had done a lot of things in tech throughout college and educationally, wasn't necessarily presented with the most friendly atmosphere in pursuing that. So for me, that is one of the reasons I'm here tonight. It's also one of the reasons that I am a co-director for Women Who Code, and why I'm heavily involved in the community, in STEM programs, and in programs with girls teaching to code, is to help bridge that gap and to help them build that confidence that it takes at this point to navigate the challenges and the opposition that they may face in tech.
Hi, my name is Mukshika Sharma. I am CEO of Tastegraphy. We are a food data company that learns our insights from the app that we have called Tasty. Before I was in this role, I worked at IBM for 2 years and graduated from UT with a computer engineering degree. So mine's a little different than kind of the opposite of yours. So my day-to-day involves, investor relations, marketing, looking at the grander vision of things. So I don't have a day-to-day tech job, but it is because we are a very technology-focused company. The three of us, the three co-founders, we're all engineers. It always helps to understand, product lines and things like that because I know tech, right? And the reason why I'm sort of here today is because throughout my life, I've had positive, very positive people telling me, that women should go into tech and things like that. So I kind of bring a different perspective of it's always been a really, for me, it's been very encouraging. And I know there's lots of statistics that say otherwise, but I just kind of wanted to bring that to the table and talk about that.
Hi, my name is Karen Lewis. I'm a software developer at BlackLocus. BlackLocus is owned by Home Depot, and we do data analysis for Home Depot. And I work on an app that the Home Depot merchants can use to compare prices to competitors. So I'm a full stack developer. I actually am also an alumni of MakerSquare, and I took a non-traditional path into software development. I started out as an English major, but I always kind of had an interest in tech. But I think midway through college, I thought, well, it's a bit late to switch majors, and let's see where this goes. And I ended up doing in the hospitality industry, working as a group reservations coordinator, and kind of wondering what my future career path would look like, and eventually I thought I really have to make a change and do something that would suit me better. And that's how I ended up going to MakerSquare and pursuing software development.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much. So let's go ahead and hit it with the first question. This one brings in a statistic from a different source, but according to the National Science Board's Science and Engineering Indicators for 2012, women currently make up only 26% of computer science and mathematical science professionals in the US. So clearly we still have a very far way to go. But this is kind of a two-part question. Why do you believe this number is still so exceptionally low? And what are the long-term risks associated with low female participation? And this is for anyone.
Happy to start. So one thing I recently examined was, what is the disconnect between girls staying interested in STEM and technology, or STEM technology. And one of the things I observed in talking with one of my colleagues was that growing up, he said, I was encouraged to break things. I love to take things apart. I love to put them back together. And nobody ever told me that it was wrong. Nobody ever told me that I had to be neat. Nobody ever told me that it wasn't okay to fail. And if I did fail at something, my response was to try harder. And what's interesting about that is for many girls and women, that is not the case. So what happens is oftentimes girls have the idea that abilities are innate. You're born with them. I'm not good at math. I'm terrible at science. I don't know how to do this. And you ask any girl in high school, even oftentimes in college and beyond, and you'll get the same responses. Now with boys, as they're growing up, if somebody says, hey, you didn't do a good enough job, you didn't get that right, they don't believe that it's about them. They believe that they just need to put in more effort. And so one of the things that I think is important for everybody to focus on as members of the community in these programs, if any of you are parents, is to instill that confidence in girls and in women, to let them know that abilities are mutable. They can be changed. They can be grown over time. Because one of the challenges is not necessarily getting girls and women interested, it's keeping them interested. At Women Who Code, we'll often see, girls and women come in and they're very interested and eager to build an app. But at the first sign of struggle or failure, they bail, and we never see them again. And part of the solution, especially as adults, is to actually re-engineer your brain. Teach yourself that it's okay to fail, that you will figure out the answer if you keep trying. So to me, that's part of the problem. Some of the long-term risk associated with that, one reason diversity is so important, and it's often not talked about, is you look at a product, you look at the iPhone and when it was developed, and the problem with hiring only right-handed engineers. Well, what happens when somebody uses that tool and they're left-handed? Does it work for a left-handed individual? And I recently had this discussion with 2 female engineers about Google's API, which they were trying to sync. They were trying to use and sync in with an app that they were creating for, and this is a very uncomfortable topic for many men in the room, periods, okay? But it is a female-specific topic. So as a company, how can you develop the tools necessary for these types of inventions and ideas if you don't have a diversified workplace, if you don't have women in the workplace and in tech?
Excellent. So she kind of touched on those first 2 questions, and then I have a follow-up question: is how can we increase the number of females pursuing computer science degrees?
So I have a point on this. This 26%, it's very daunting, right? It's a really low number that, I remember when I was signing up to be an engineer, they said it was 19% women that graduated with electrical engineering from UT. You had the College Board statistics, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, that's so low. But, something about that statistic is also that how many women, so there were 3 girls who did computer science with me all 4 years in high school. And 2 of them actually, even though they did the 4 years and they were really interested, at the end of it, they weren't really that excited to be a engineer, right? They ended up doing one of them ended up doing marketing, and one of them ended up doing PR. And that's just something that kind of screamed out to them, that's what career they wanted to build. So I understand that there is this really low number of women going into technology, but you kind of wonder also, is it just about that they're not getting enough exposure, or is it just that they don't want to go into technology, right? Why are there not more men in marketing, for example? And it is an issue when it is an issue when 100% of the women that want to do it are not going into technology. But if there is that gap, then we need to close the women that want to go in technology and they don't have access to it. But we also need to be aware that there might just not be that much interest in the first place. So that's my counter, I guess.
And I guess to build upon that, because I think you are right, like that there is a lot of women who gravitate towards other fields, and like Karen, I also was an English major, even though I took CS classes in high school and I was very interested in them. But I always was like, I think, reading and writing is more interesting. And, I've been thinking a lot about why I even thought that, because I had a lot of supportive people as well. There's nobody telling me I couldn't do it. In fact, my parents were incredibly supportive, my teachers were. But I think a lot of it comes down to perception, partly perception of who else is in the field. And it's really great that there's so much rhetoric right now around women in tech, because you are seeing more, even though we have such a relatively low number, seeing more women in the field opens it up to if you see 90% of women go into marketing, I think even unconsciously you're just kind of gravitate towards that, knowing that this tends to be where people like you end up. And so with more exposure, there is like the idea that, oh, this woman is working in this field, like, what if I did that too? Like, just the idea even subconsciously occurs to you. But then I think there's also generating the interest, and I think we're going to talk about this later, but how the diversity of like opportunity in the tech world. Like, I mean, I think each one of us does something very different, and each one of us hopefully finds that really interesting, but there's a lot of different ways to be involved, and I don't think that that is brought to the attention of a lot of women who are maybe interested, like your classmates maybe would have been interested in more of like a design, or like even like building an app or some form that like was not, that they didn't realize was an opportunity to them. So I think those are two ways that like really more unconsciously we can encourage women to be more interested in the field.
I have a personal note to add. Whenever I did decide to transition to a career in computer science and software development, I thought in the beginning, that I was prepared. I was sort of mentally preparing myself, because there's a lot of, you hear a lot about how you're gonna have to prove yourself, how maybe you'll be the only woman working on a team, and how you'll need to appear more confident, and you'll have to try to sort of, basically prove yourself to be, to show that you're really skilled, and be prepared to deal with people who doubt your abilities. So that was on my mind when I started transitioning to CS.
All right, so one of the ways that has been discussed to increase participation in computer science by women is something like MakerSquare, a coding boot camp. But according to Course Report, which has aggregated data from 63 coding boot camps in the US and in Canada, only 38% of these programs, these coding academies or boot camps, graduates were women in 2014. So, do you think that these coding boot camps can help us close this gap? And as former attendees, Karen and Ashley, why did you choose to go to a boot camp, and do you think that's something that more women would feel comfortable transitioning in that space?
So I chose to go to a boot camp because I had thought about CS, very similarly, like I was interested. I even took a college CS class, but it was more for fun than as like a career. And then afterwards, I spent a lot of time debating whether I would go back to school. But at that point, like, and I know for me, I was young, but like, say an older woman who has more responsibilities than I do wants to go back, I think school and CS in particular would become even harder to pursue. So I do think that boot camps provide that opportunity to women. I know a girl that was in my class, actually, I think two actually, had children, which I don't think would have been nearly as easy for them to enter the tech industry by pursuing like a traditional CS degree in that way. But I ended up doing it because a female friend of mine actually went to MakerSquare. So, and that's how I found out about it. And she actually transitioned from the same field into CS. And, I think that speaks to my point earlier that knowing somebody, another female who successfully went through and like entered a male-dominated field, and, I kind of was like, oh, it's an opportunity for me to do something I want, and another female did it successfully.
I think that's exactly it. I felt like I missed the boat in college, and to go through more school, it would require, if MakerSquare or other boot camps didn't exist right now, if I was, I'd have to be very committed, and I would be probably taking out loans, working part-time, and trying to, and delaying life until I could, complete the degree and just try to, there's a lot of online resources where you can, so that's also helpful, but with boot camps like MakerSquare, it's just really affordable, and they have great hiring networks, and you learn really relevant skills really quickly, and it's really perfect for people who feel like they kind of missed their opportunity in college. So,
thank you. All right, so back to the Google white paper. They found that the top 4 factors influencing a woman to join computer science are social encouragement, self-perception, academic exposure, and career perception. And those first 3 are up here. Social encouragement is what we've talked about a little bit, positive reinforcement from either teachers or parents or a role model. Self-perception is a girl's interest and perceptions of her own proficiency and how comfortable she is problem solving and with mathematics. And then academic exposure goes into the early exposure of computer science and making sure that we have not just offerings at schools where they say, okay, yeah, we have a coding class, but high quality offerings that encourage girls. And then that last one, career perception, has to do with young girls not realizing what a career in tech is, what that would look like, or not knowing any females who are in that space. So, out of these 4, and I think you guys have the list, which factors played a significant role in your decision to pursue computer science, and why were those factors significant?
All 4 of these were definitely a huge segment, and we're immigrants from India, and my dad is a computer engineer, and he has 2 daughters, so he got really excited when he would show me all his computer stuff. Let's upgrade the RAM and things like that, right? It was fun. It was cool. I got to spend time with my dad. So that was definitely a really great early start. And then I had a really great computer science teacher in high school that definitely encouraged, you're good at this. Maybe you should consider this as a career. And when I did decide on eventually majoring, I was thinking I would do business. That was my first initial thought, but another one of my teachers told me that if you have a good hard skill, then it would be you could succeed a lot better and things like that. So definitely having external influencers that kind of tell you that, hey, this is a good career for you, and it definitely makes an impact, especially because during that time you're very impressionable, and I didn't know anybody who was going into the field, but kind of stepping stones that allowed me to kind of just be like, all right, this seems right.
So my first thought when I read this was Google did not send me this survey because these don't apply to me.
At that point, I already had enough.
Thought a little bit more about it, and I'll kind of go down the list. So my foray into technology was actually in middle school, and what interested me the most is there was a program, you can still buy it, it's called PETZ, P-E-T-Z, and there was a community of us online who would use hex editors to modify the program. So at an age and growing up in a space where I did not have access to a lot of things, a lot of toys, I grew up in a very small apartment, I was very interested in the concept that I could create anything I wanted for free. So the way that the program works is it's a simulated PETZ environment. So for any of you who could not have animals growing up, this would have been the perfect thing for you. The very cool thing about it is that there was a group of us who quickly learned that you could take a chihuahua and you could turn it into a monkey, if you so wanted. And so at that point, realizing that I had so much power in my hands that cost nothing, really compelled me to start creating things. Social encouragement, I did not see in my inner circle or family, but I did see online. And I think that's oftentimes where people do find that encouragement. At that age, sometimes children who are more introverted tend to turn to an online community, and being very engaged and very good at technology tends to gain them that social encouragement and that social circle. So I do think that for me, social encouragement in that way played a role. Self-perception, I was a pretty stubborn child. I think that really helps. If you can teach children persistence, I think they are much more likely to pursue a career in technology. Academic exposure. While I had the academic exposure, I had some very negative experiences with it. I will share one with you because I think it's pertinent to this conversation. And it was in a beginner's Java class. Female professor. I walked in, and there were 2 females in the classroom that semester. And she took a look at me and she said, "Are you sure you're in the right classroom? Psychology is up the hallway." And the entire semester went just about like that. And so back to kind of Karen's note and also Ashley's, the feeling of having to prove yourself can sometimes be there, and that's not always created by men. That's also created by women. And sometimes we forget that. So for me, it was an academic exposure. Although I had it, the experience was not there. And career perception, I think Ashley's point is really important, that you can't be what you can't see. And prior to more recent years, I think many girls have not known somebody in tech. I certainly did not, in any form or fashion. So I did not get that career perception or an idea of what that looked like. But I do think that's something that in the last couple of years has absolutely improved, and it does help encourage getting more women into tech.
Okay, fantastic. So additionally, that same study found that most of the decision making, which it kind of seems like most people here, most of the decision making to pursue computer science occurs before young women enter college. So this appears true for some of the panel here, but when did you decide that you wanted a career in computer science, and how did that impact your decision to commit to a career in tech? So for Karen and Ashley, did you consider it before college? Did you consider it in college? And then what led you to not go that route?
I guess I'll start. A little bit in college, but like I mentioned before, I thought, well, it's too late to major in computer science. But I did my work study in IT, where I was mostly at the front desk, and I thought, well, if I keep a foot in the door, maybe it's an option. But I was still thinking, what can I do with my English major? Maybe I'll be a journalist. Not very many jobs in that area, but I ended up actually working, doing cable Verizon support, phone support for Verizon cable, and that was kind of my way of keeping my foot in the door in tech, somewhat related. And then, but when I moved to Austin, I just needed a different job, and I ended up signing up with a temp agency because I just was having trouble finding a job, and I ended up working in the hospitality industry and started doing data entry, and was promoted to the group reservations coordinator. And I worked with systems, with the hotel management systems, but I was kind of always in the back of my mind, but I never thought, and I was kind of just waiting for my opportunity to move forward with a different education, because I could see that my skills really weren't in the area that I was currently working in, because the options open to me were management, just kind of like hotel management, or that was pretty much it. And I thought, well, my real skills are not in this field. They are, or like a business administration, they're more in problem solving, and I knew that. So I lived in Japan for 1 year because my husband is a grad student at UT, and he was doing research there. And during that time, I worked as an English teacher part-time. That gave me the opportunity to take online courses, computer science fundamentals. So that got me started in thinking, I did well in those courses, and I really enjoyed it, and I can do this. Whenever I get back to the United States, I'm going to go for it. and I'm not going to go back to a job that really doesn't suit me. And I tried to apply on my own for a few months. It was it was a little difficult. I didn't get many responses, and I started thinking, okay, I'm going to apply for a traditional degree, and I started planning out how I would do that. But then I ran into MakerSquare, and that's how it was really timely.
All right, and Ashley, what about you? Did you think about computer science? What made you decide, no, I'm not in college?
So I definitely did. I mean, I took 2 CS classes in high school, took like the AP classes, did, as best as you can in those. And then I also took and I think really for me, what it was is I took a freshman year, I took a CS class, another, like a secondary intro to class in Java. And I also did really well I got an A, which I thought was pretty good, for an English major at the time. But nobody, thinking back on it, I felt very similar to what Trisha said, that I felt a little ostracized from the class. Nobody said quite anything as bad as they told her, but I wasn't really welcomed, I guess. Nobody really, I think they thought it was weird that I was there, honestly. And I do remember one of my TAs kind of would be very dismissive to me every time I would talk. You're not a major. Why are you even here? Which I feel like is really the opposite of how you should treat somebody who is pursuing something. Because if I'm taking it as an elective, I'm interested, right? But nobody was like, "You're good at this. Why don't you consider pursuing it?" Versus another class of mine, which I actually ended up, the professor said basically the opposite. It was like, "You are doing well at this. Why don't you make this your major?" And I did. And I think it was that that subtle that was not subtle, but the difference between that and the unsubtle or the subtle disencouragement in my CS classes that made me think, well, somebody told me I'm good at this, why not continue with it? And then I entered, I was a writer and editor for 2 years for a marketing company, and I just found myself not really challenged by it. It was kind of, I learned that it was more of a hobby, whereas I wanted something that was challenging. And so I thought for probably a year or 2 to go back to school, and it just didn't feel right. And I think a lot of that also goes back to that class where I didn't have a super positive experience. And whenever I found out about MakerSquare, I think it kind of just struck a chord where they were actively recruiting women. They had a group, a weekly meetup for lunch where they bring in women professionals in the industry, and it just felt like it would be a more welcoming environment, and one that I would really thrive in more so than being in going back to school to get my CS degree. So timing was right, I guess, at that point.
So since this decision does happen for, according to the study, before young women begin college, Trisha, you mentor girls in coding programs. Why do you think that it's important that we start encouraging girls early? And how can we help more girls make the decision to pursue computer science before they get to college?
So I think it's important that we start encouraging girls early for a few reasons. I think one, at that age, your brain is still evolving. You're still figuring out how to learn, what your learning style is, what your interests are, and it's an age where girls are very impressionable, kids are very impressionable. So I think for kids to have a positive experience at a young age is very important. I also think that begins to shape their learning experiences after the fact. Oftentimes what you see is, again, it usually comes around 6th and 7th grade. And before that, you have girls who are very interested in building and creating and science and math. And then they fall off. And they fall off because developmentally, and there's actually something scientific to this. I'm not going to quote it because I'm going to get it wrong. But the same thing happens with boys in English. And developmentally, there's a shift around that age. And what happens is they start to excel. There's a part of their brain that starts to excel in those specific areas. And what happens when you're not reinforcing some of those components of STEM, is that they do start to build the idea that they are not good at science, they are not good at math. And oftentimes those beliefs stick with them throughout their life. And it becomes much more difficult to decide to pursue a career in CS or to figure out how to navigate that opposition if it occurs. And so I think it's not as simple as the question seems, because right now when people think about that, they say, okay, it's important for us to start encouraging students to get involved in STEM. And while I believe that answer is very true, we have to give them the actual skills. I think a part of the disconnect is that they don't have the confidence to continue with that path. And so as they are met with opposition, as they are met with challenges, as they find paths that might be a little bit easier, because naturally they may be more social and they may not see those that type of interaction in engineering, or they may not go to work every day and not know what the heck they're doing. And that is a really comfortable feeling, to take an easier path. I think that is part of the problem as well. And it's a part of the problem that I'm not sure we have completely addressed. And I think we can help more girls make the decision to pursue computer science careers prior to college by encouraging them to find comfort in the uncomfortable things, to have confidence, to know that if they keep working at it, as hard as it is, it's going to be worth it. They can make a difference. They can do greater things. And that those efforts are going to turn into so much more than just taking an easier path.
Excellent answer, thank you. All right, so to shake things up a little bit, we're gonna open up two questions from the audience, probably about 10 minutes of this, and then we'll get back to some of the predetermined questions. But based on the first half of things that we've been talking about, has anybody thought of something that they want for any specific panelist, or just in general a question that you have? And Sean will run the mic too.
Thank you. I had a question about non-traditional students now entering STEM fields. A lot of what we've talked about right now is about youth going into STEM fields, but it seems right now that there's a big push for adults to also go back and to tap into that. So can any of you guys maybe speak to that a little bit?
So big companies like, we worked for IBM, they used to have really great programs that would allow people from different departments that wanted to go into a technical role. They would actually provide the training for them. So one of my old colleagues, she was an English major, and she wanted to, and she used to write the technical writing of it, and she had part of this program was, okay, you can come into a technical role and we'll teach you on the job. And, I think that is a very, very good way for a bigger company to get involved in this conversation. Unfortunately, they stopped that program. And I think that is a huge step back, right? And, especially when the biggest topic headlines are, how do you encourage diversity in teams, right? And they're all looking at each other for answers, and then they take out the things that need to be there, right, in place. So it's not a bad thing that a non-traditional person goes into a tech field. Of course, as a traditional engineer, in my head goes through like, oh my gosh, they don't have any logic background or any sort of math background, and wait, what? But she was one of the better programmers there, and so I think there's a lot of things that are in place that just should be taken advantage for.
I think also and this is a great thing about boot camps, is that part of it is like, well, who are companies hiring and who do they want to hire? And a lot of them, I think, some very blatantly and some not so much, they are concerned with hiring somebody from a non-traditional background because of their qualifications. And I think there's a lot that boot camps are doing that help those companies understand that you're not really taking on a liability. In a lot of cases, you're taking on somebody who has, like, even with their diverse background, some skills that you didn't even know you were missing, and that will, like she said, bring a lot to the table, especially as programmers or in other roles in the tech field that other more traditional students might not have. Different, like, critical thinking skills, different ways of approaching problems creatively, that will, so in a way, I think boot camps are really doing a lot for that, but it's taking, it takes a long time for companies to change their perceptions, but a lot of it is getting people from those backgrounds in those fields and then having companies see that they can be successful and help the company, because ultimately that's what a company wants, right? Somebody to help them make more money, usually. I think there was a question back here.
So, and I'll make this really short and quick. When I heard your question and you said, there seems to be this push to getting adults into STEM-related things. There's this push not just for kids to learn coding, but adults to learn coding. And it made me think of a couple scenarios of why that's true and the problem that people are trying to solve. So I had a girl who's a journalism major at UT the other day send me a text, and she said, "Hey, they're making us learn coding. I may need you." And when a programmer thinks about coding, you're thinking about logic and all this other stuff, and you're encompassing back end and database stuff as well as front end, and for her, being a journalism major, there's a big push for coding now because of blogging, of needing the basic skills of styling and formatting, and it's become very important in that industry because now a lot of journalism roles have become very engaged with social media and other things. The other thing we've seen with women who code, and I found it really interesting, is we're starting to see an older crowd of individuals come in and have an interest in coding for a few reasons. Think about all of the technology companies. Who has the best benefits in Austin? Who has the best vacation days in Austin? Who has the best, they say work-life balance. I don't know that that's always true. In Austin, it's the tech companies. Who also has the best pay? Where are all of the jobs at? And beyond that, I think you've got a lot of people looking for that flexibility now that tech offers. And so tech has also come with benefits that are very, very enticing to a lot of adults. And so I think that's why you're also seeing a lot of people change careers. I think that's why you're also seeing a lot of interest in it because of what it can offer them and their families.
Just on that note, I really agree that that's part of what motivated me too, is that there's a lot of jobs, and it's kind of the new route to the middle class in a way, and it can help, and I think it could help close the income gap.
Hi, I'm going to ask this question on behalf of my mother, who I know is an angel in this room and is very proud of all of you up there. As a woman who was one of the 3%, and probably would be very happy to see that it's even up to 26%, because she started in the 70s, and became a manager, project manager. Before that was a title of touchscreen technology in mission control, before that was even on our phones. So she was somebody who was a pioneer in this. And she went into management, and I'm just curious, are you being groomed for management? Do you see management potential at the companies that you are now starting and developing in? Is this something that as women you feel, how many of you actually have female managers at this point?
Yeah, at IBM I had a female manager, and the most interesting thing is that, if you seek help, and anybody, whatever gender you are, if you seek help and mentorship, people are very, very kind to help you out. And but that is a very, very good point, because I even see it in entrepreneurship. They'll say, okay, well, why is there such a gap in female entrepreneurs, right? And you know, it's one of those kind of the self-perception things, right? Lots of women do not like to boast their performance. They don't really like to consider themselves better than they are, versus like guys, they'll look at, you know, the statistic and be like, oh, it can round it up, you know. And that's a really sort of way of, I guess you could say, managerial way of thinking. And you know, something that I kind of learned as I was getting all these mentors and the people that were the female managers, they were really good at you know, self-boasting or tooting your own horn, and that's the way that they ended up getting where they are, and you know, being self-respected and things like that, right? And I think that's a part in part of the teaching that you kind of have to do. And I really liked what you said, when they're little, to help them understand these things that are going to help you be better at tech, you know, because yes, you are good at math and you'll continue being good at math, right? Or you're good at this and you'll continue being good at it. Don't listen to all these guys who are just boosting their way up, right? And that's the thing that you kind of have to understand as you're trying to climb the ladder, because those are the people around you, and that's the game that you're playing, right? And it is a game at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for my own company, we're very small, and while I don't have a female manager, I am encouraged greatly to like take on more responsibility in my roles, and I do think that that's a really great thing that I'm very blessed to have at my company. But I did read this really interesting article recently that was talking, and this speaks to Machika's part, what she said about the way women talk and the way that we're kind of in many ways unconsciously told to speak about ourselves and our achievements. And the article is saying, you know, that a lot of women, especially in meetings, the way that they phrase things is, well, if you don't mind, or if I could, or just please excuse me, and like they qualify their stuff. And I don't think it's like something so much as that like you have to do that. Like if you didn't do that, anybody would look down upon you, or that they would think that you were being, but in some cases they do see that as aggression. And I mean, I think that's going to be very company to company, person to person. But I think a lot of it is teaching women to understand that the way you speak about your talents, your achievements, even just what you do, is important, because I really wasn't ever told that, and it's not something I've really thought about until I was in the tech industry. And the more, it's something that I really would like to focus on more for myself, and I think it's something that we should be teaching younger, especially younger women.
I guess I'd like to add, I think it is really important for people to feel confident and like they and not embarrassed about, you know, appearing confident either. On the other side, it's important not to like play the lean in game, and I think that externally that everyone has to change their way of thinking about it. So.
Yeah, there was one question right back here.
Cool. Actually, my question was kind of a Oh, were you going to speak?
Oh, no, that's okay. Go for
it. My question was kind of a continuation of what you briefly brought up, Ashley, but it was about the way women speak, and a frustration I personally found when moving from a more junior role to being more experienced is using non-soft language and being seen as abrasive as compared to my male colleagues. And I guess I was wondering if any of you had experienced that, and if so, how did you get around that problem?
I mean, I think at some point, like whether you in your company or just like in the tech community, going to meetups and stuff like that, I definitely have experienced it, and I don't really have an answer, unfortunately. I think a lot of it is like finding somebody that you can, like, I think, talk to. For me, that's been a good way to and say, like, here's the issue, and here's like how I know I can't go about addressing it. Like, what can we do to make this better for everybody involved? And because at the end of the day, like, typically it's probably coming from like a teammate, right? Or like, you know, somebody that you work with, and you have to keep working with them. Like that, at the end of the day, that's just like a fact of the matter. And so how can you address without diminishing yourself? And I think that's a really hard thing to do, and especially a lot of times for women, because you're more likely to take on that responsibility, I think, in a lot of cases. Unfortunately, I have not found the right answer. I don't know if anybody here has one.
I don't know that anybody has the right answer there. I think I'm going to give a very generic answer because I think it's what has worked the best for me. And that is to kind of separate myself from, I think, those thoughts and those feelings. I go back to what I know about myself, and I know I produce good work. I know I work very hard, and I know I'm intelligent. And for me, when I get into those situations where I am not really sure how my teammates feel about me, or I'm not sure if they, you know, think I'm doing as good of a job as maybe one of my male counterparts, or if they think that I am being abrasive, I really just try to get out of my own head. Because sometimes that is what's going on, and sometimes they are vocal or verbal about it, or they can be. I haven't had that experience. My colleagues have been great. But I do think what happens as well, and you know, this is for women, but I think this is for everybody. I think we also build on those stories sometimes, and that can be really, really tough. And so even if things are going on, I think there is absolutely in certain situations a need for it to be addressed, and for you to say, hey, this is what I noticed. Is this true? And kind of check in with them. I think that's really important, that communication. And then also just reminding yourself who you are and that you're doing a great job, and knowing that that's the truth.
I guess there's also only so much that one person can do, and sometimes in a situation, maybe the best thing that you could do is communicate. Like you were saying, if you have somebody who knows, who's kind of maybe advocating for you, or that you can, as someone who's interested in, you know, actively in your career advancement, then that's probably one of the best ways to advance in your career. But if you, but sometimes there's only so much you can do, and you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So.
And the other thing that I would like to point out is that women are very quick to take something and take it to heart, right? And I know this because I do it a lot, and it's something that, you know, you kind of have to work on. But you take it to heart because you feel like it's an attack towards you. But if a male gets the similar advice, they'll just be like, okay, whatever, you know, and they'll just they'll take it, but then they'll understand, okay, it's not, it's more of a just a comment based on possibly something that happened during that moment, and they're a lot quicker to kind of brush it off than women are, and to both of these points is just having that connection and that communication, understanding, was it really, you know, against me, or was it like just a comment that they made, you know? Because I feel like if you kind of get towards that, then it's a lot easier to go to the next step.
Okay, so I know we have a few more questions from the audience, and we will definitely have time for more questions at the end. But before we get back into some of the questions that I have for these lovely women, I meant to at the beginning, but I got too excited to ask everyone in here if you would raise your hand if you are currently in a tech or a CS job or a STEM field of any type. Okay, good. And then how many of you are looking to, you know, transition into something more technology-based? Fantastic. Okay, so continuing about talking about perception, I wanted to ask the audience, actually, when you think about computer science and tech careers, what words come to mind? Just shout them out. Nerds.
Rough.
Rough.
Fun.
I said that.
Fun. Hard. Puzzle.
Exciting.
Exciting. Screen time. Programmers.
Long hours.
Long hours.
Indoors.
Indoors. Yes. That's what I thought. Okay, so that, again, I keep talking about this Google white paper, but they did this study with girls who had early exposure to computer science programs, and girls who did not. And they found that a lot of the positive connotation, which you would expect, a lot of the positive words about puzzles and fun and solving problems, those things were very common for girls who had early exposure. And I think that a lot of, I would say the majority of them said things like nerd or not cool or boring or hard or things like that. So to our panel, before you started a career in computer science, what did you think that it was going to look like? What did you think it was going to be? And then once you got there, how did that perception change? So we'll start with that.
I guess I can start. At first, when I was deciding my major, I started as a pre-med, and I thought I just never considered a career in computer science. Even though I kind of liked technology, I never thought, as a career. The reason I wanted to be pre-med was I thought it was that I was interested in it, or that it seemed interesting, and it was economically viable, that it would be fun to study, that it would be personally fulfilling, helping people. And so that's kind of that's the usual story of people who start out as pre-med. But I thought, but for various reasons, I switched majors to English majors, part of which was encouragement from a professor who said, you're doing well in this, and I wasn't doing as well in my pre-med classes. And I thought, great, I can, and I was good at that in high school, so I thought, I would really, it would make my life so much better, and I'm sure that I can find a career that I would enjoy, if I just follow what I'm good at, if I just pursue what I'm good at. So, and it's interesting because my mom actually has a degree in computer science, and she tried to get jobs after she obtained her degree, but was having trouble. She said that she ran into employers who said, we're looking for someone with more experience, and it was just hard for her to break into that field. So she actually became a business computer teacher, and she got a Cisco certification and taught Cisco Cisco networking to high schoolers. And so she always had a foot in the door there. And she was also writing this TOS, that's so old, grading program. I forgot what language it was. But so I kind of had some exposure, but I'd say that what really got me finally in the door, even though I had this kind of in the back of my mind, was just knowing what my strengths were, knowing that that's what I enjoyed, and finally kind of matching it with the right career, and having some sort of external forces align with my goals in the form of boot camps. So.
What about anyone else? Did you think it was going to be one thing and then you got there and it was different, or do you sit in a windowless basement?
Not a windowless basement. We have windows. I think I definitely thought it was difficult, and I'm not here to say that it isn't, but I think that's exciting for a lot of people, that you're going to be challenged every day. It kind of sucks to be bored at work every day, at least in my opinion. But I do think that one of the thoughts that I had that prevented me for a large majority of my early career was that it felt inaccessible, especially that difficult level. And a lot of that was because I didn't know what kind of jobs were available to me in the tech industry. If even when I took my college CS class, I don't think they really even talked about like what kind of jobs you could have, and they definitely didn't talk about like variety of jobs like design or building apps or anything like that. I mean, it was very focused on learning just like the fundamentals, which is understandable, but I think in a lot of ways it did make it, coming out of that class, I wasn't thrilled because I didn't know what the prospects were. So.
Yeah, I definitely like what Tricia said earlier about you can't be what you can't see. And I think that that's something we're going to talk about at the end, how all of us are going to show younger women what those jobs are, so they'll get excited about it. So this kind of goes along with the previous question, but many women believe that computer science is a career that cannot fulfill both their academic passion, which includes inventing, problem solving, exploration, and intangible social passions like helping people, conversation, coming up with medical breakthroughs that make a profession personally rewarding. So let's hear from a couple of you about, do you enjoy your profession? And how does your career fulfill both of those academic passions and your social passions?
So this is very hitting to home because, when I graduated, I always kind of knew that I wanted to create a company, but I knew that I needed some sort of skill set or time in the industry to kind of understand how to create a product from the ground up. So that's why I decided to join IBM, and IBM was great, and it was really great at teaching you structure and teaching you, the process that needs to go. But it wasn't completely rewarding at a personal level. The product that I was building was not something that, possibly I would use, and it was very enterprise software, and it was, I didn't know who the customers were, and it was very just a black box, right? So you were hidden in this black box, and so when we left, it kind of was a breath of air because we realized that we could use our technology and our skill sets for something that we really love, and which is food, and something that we really believe in, which is personalizing taste. So we really figured out that, okay, yes, I can use technology, but I can use it for a better purpose. And that's something that I've seen over and over again in entrepreneurs, that they have this drive to just improve the world and find something that they're really passionate about, and leave their companies and use that technology for the greater good. So for me now, today, I love my job. It's really rewarding. It's really exciting because every day is just new. Because I know that at the end of the day, we have a really good purpose.
Do you enjoy your profession? I don't feel like anybody up here is allowed to say no, but I wouldn't say no even if I was allowed to. I absolutely do. I think, I went into technology because, and this is going to sound kind of like a big statement, but I wanted to change the world. And, the interesting thing about that statement is many people would hear it and they would say, you are crazy. A programmer would hear it and say, it's possible. It takes 5 or 6 months. Because it is, and I think that's the difference. When you have a skill, similar to home builders, and you look at solving the problem of housing, of neighborhoods, of even homeless. They have skills that can solve those problems. It's just coming up with the right solution. And in technology, it is a very similar thing. You are equipped with skills to solve any problem you want. You just have to put in the time and the effort. And I think that's the really cool thing is I go to work every day. I was on the product side before, working for a company that focused on one objective. I recently moved over to Mutual Mobile, who is big on innovation and breakthroughs, and that is our goal. It's not the technology, it's to solve a problem. And what I appreciate most about my company, and really just technology as a whole, is that it's never about the technology. it's about the problem. And I think that is the reason many people go into it, and especially many women.
I got into, excuse me. Let's see. When I'm sorry, what was the question? What were we talking about?
Do you like your job?
Yes. Thank you. When I first started pursuing it, I wanted a job that I liked, that suited my skills, with a decent salary, but I got a lot more. I have a job that's really great, and I really love doing it. And speaking to the passion part and the social benefit part, I know that whatever skills I have, I can build, given enough time and learning, that almost just whatever I want. So I feel like my skills are portable, and I can apply them to whatever cause that I want.
Yeah, and I guess my final bit on this is that I actually did Teach for America for a little bit out of college when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my English degree, and I was really motivated to do something that was beneficial to other communities, and but and this is a story for a whole different time, but it didn't end up working out for me in Teach for America. And so I ended up going into my job, and I felt like something was lacking in that. I really did want to make a change and help in other communities and such. And so I started volunteering, but I was like, I really would like to combine what I do in my spare time and personal time with my job. And I didn't, the industry I was in, I didn't really see a way to do that, especially make a living for myself. And so the industry that I previously viewed as inaccessible kind of gave me a way to made something that I wanted to do accessible. And so even though now I love my job now, but like Tricia said, it does give you hard skills to do something greater than necessarily maybe what you're doing right now, and I think that's a really great thing that tech does.
Awesome. Okay, this is my last question, then I'll open it back up to the audience, and then we are going to talk a little bit about what our next steps are, because obviously we've identified a problem, we've talked about some of the things we can do, but let's come up with some concrete steps. So my very last question for you all is, what can men do to influence the shift of more women in technology, and how can they better support women in technology? And this is a tough one. Obviously, we don't have all the answers, but.
Okay, so first I'm going to cross out the word men, and I'm going to say everybody, because I do think it's everybody, and I think that it's going to take a lot of combined efforts. And I think what we can do to influence this shift, one thing I heard several months back, and it was a really good takeaway for me, is that we can all be a mentor. We all know something that somebody else doesn't know, and we all have something to offer. And oftentimes we don't pass along our knowledge to other people because we don't think that it's valuable enough. We don't think that we're smart enough. We don't think that we're educated enough in a certain area, and so we don't pass along that knowledge. And especially with women in tech, oftentimes what we see at the Women Who Code meetups is you have a ton of skill sets in one room, and very knowledgeable individuals, and yet none of them feel like they are experienced or educated enough to get up and give a 5-minute lightning talk, or to sit down with somebody for coffee and give them some advice or teach them something, or hand somebody a business card. And so what happens is, in an environment where people are coming together to feel supported and to find these resources, they still end up feeling alienated. They still end up feeling like they don't have the people there to help them make this leap. And so I think one of the big things that we can do is everybody can act as a mentor to somebody. That's both men and women. I think a second thing we can do is, and this is going to sound really simple and very elementary, but build people up and don't tear them down. Technology can be a very scary field. It can be very dogmatic, which means it's either black or white. There doesn't tend to be a lot of gray areas. And so what happens in that approach is oftentimes people are afraid to talk tech or to state their opinion on something because it doesn't fall into somebody's range and they are wrong. And it is a very scary thing to be wrong. And in tech, that fear is often very real. And it's real because every time you make a statement, your chances of being inaccurate sometimes can be fairly high because it's based on somebody else's opinion. And as programmers, we all know that our language is the best, our way is the right way, and we totally wrote that code in the most efficient way possible until we meet our neighbor who did the exact same thing. And Java is way better than C#, is way better than Ruby, is way better than JavaScript. And so I think in a community that is very, again, kind of dogmatic in their approach, just very my way is the right way, I think that in order to influence a shift, we need to kind of let down our guard a little bit, embrace other communities in technology, and not be so hard and fast on what we think is the right way to do things.
I would suggest not relying on people to promote themselves. And if you're an employer or manager, like maybe taking a more active role in encouraging employees. I mean, if you do have self-promotion, like maybe you can encourage people to speak out and nominate themselves. Or you could just have kind of more of a senior level conference about it. Because I think oftentimes women may not promote themselves.
Excellent. One more comment? Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that I wanted to, I guess, kind of mention was, this idea that tech is filled with guys that are all into video games, that are all into mostly things that you can't really, women aren't usually knowledgeable in because they don't grow up that way, or they don't grow up with playing these games or playing being excited about Marvel or something like that, right? But one of the things that people around me have done always is kind of spend some time to kind of engross me in that culture, and that's always, even though I might not be completely excited about it, but at least knowledgeable about it, so I don't feel out of place when I'm in a situation where where people are talking about it, or just as simple as, this new game's coming out, aren't you excited? And you're like, wait, what? So I feel like as a surrounding community of, when you have mostly men in a field, they're naturally going to have things that the 26% won't know about. So maybe just including them, or just encouraging them to know a little bit of this and that, so they don't feel completely out of place when you go out for beers and things like that. And then you actually want to go out for beers, right?
I want to kind of elaborate on that. I actually read a blog today that some woman, I think she's getting her PhD in a STEM field, and she was saying something almost kind of the opposite of what you're saying, which I agree with that. But she was saying, be you. And I think that's a lot, like, especially in a field that's so dominated by one gender, if you come in and you're interested, and I mean, when I first started, there was 3 girls, including me and my whole company. And it was funny, we would talk about these things that like were so different than what the guys talked about. And I don't even think it was not necessarily them being like discriminating against us or anything like that, but there wasn't like an interest on both sides. And so there is, I think it's not just saying include us, but like realize that there's other interests out there and like other points of views, and don't be afraid even if something that you're interested in is not like what your male colleagues are interested in, that it's not a valid interest and a valid thing to talk about, and like a valid thing for somebody else who doesn't know about it to be introduced to. And I think everybody being accepting of just different ideas and different interests is a really big thing that we need to think about just every day in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's relevant for both men and women in this industry. All right, so we'll open it up to a couple more questions from the audience. I see one right away.
Hi, I come from academia where a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome, which you guys have kind of like indirectly talked about. And I'm just wondering, a lot of people say that one of the best ways to deal with that is good mentorship and getting good constructive feedback. And I'm just curious how much you guys know of or have personally experienced that in your own journey into tech, and like what kind of structure above you has helped or not to give you constructive feedback to help you feel capable and like you belong there, like you're doing a job that you should be doing.
So I guess I'll speak to this initially. In MakerSquare, I was fortunate to have we had a lot of teachers, and they were very supportive, and I definitely struggled with this a lot. Like, would get very upset with myself and feel like I didn't belong, even though, I was, according to them, doing what I should be doing. And I think for me, the most helpful thing was obviously the support of the mentors and the teachers telling me this is normal for one, and you are being successful in what you're doing. But also just talking to my peers, like going to meetups and going to other, this is a problem that I think women and men experience, especially in the tech field. And just like hearing somebody else be like, yeah, I did that stupid thing too, or like I struggled with this. And then you realize that, and that helps you realize that what you're doing is not it's something that somebody else has encountered or done that's, that is contributing to that feeling like you have a group, and kind of seeking that out, I think helps a lot, or helped me a lot with the imposter syndrome. And that's not to say that I don't experience it still, but usually that's where I feel resolution in that instance.
When I started, I definitely anticipated that I would have to prove my abilities. I kind of mentioned that earlier. I'm in a supportive environment, and I appreciate that there's meetings with the dev manager, with all the team members, and that gives me a chance to check in with my career goals with them, and I still struggle sort of personally, even though it's really a flat structure. Like the other day, I'll be honest, at a meeting I asked, I put an idea that I had in the form of a question, like, what does everyone think about blah, 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 instead of just saying the idea. And there was a friend who actually pulled me aside and said, you don't need to do that. And that was really good feedback that I got. So I think it's supportive, and that my workplace pays attention to that kind of thing. And that's.
Yeah, Trisha, go ahead. Okay. So I've definitely struggled with imposter syndrome. I think as far as mentorship is concerned and overcoming imposter syndrome, I think it's very similar to a relationship. I'm not Dr. Phil, but with relationships, you can't get everything from one person. You can't get everything from one friend. Different friends offer different perspectives. And personalities, and I think when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome and seeking out mentorship and influencers, I think it works very much that way. So I think that you really have to kind of tackle it from a combination of things, and through that, I think that's seeking out mentorships. I think that's meetups. I think that is colleagues. It is finding your own circle of friends who encourage you to do those things. One thing we had established at Women Who Code, it has been really helpful for the 5 of us who attend in our careers, has been coding Sundays. So we have brunch and we code for 4 hours on Sundays on whatever we want to work on. And that becomes a really nice supportive learning environment. And so I think when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome, it's really about building the skills, building the confidence. I don't think it's fair to rely on your company to give you all of that, because a company can't. But the fortunate thing, especially about being in Austin, is that you do have access to so many people. You look at all of the individuals in this room. You have access to so many meetups and so many resources. And most people are willing to give you advice or mentor you on any topic if you just offer to buy them coffee, or booze. I'm not a booze person, but I did know somebody who would do just about anything for whiskey, so it works.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump off of that as well. The term "fake it till you make it" is the greatest thing about tech is that you can only go so far with that, because at the end of the day, your results are results, right? And it's either 0 or 1, right? So it's a really great thing that you do have access to that network and the people that can provide you with information that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's really important to understand your level, right? It's really understand that I am over here and this is what I know, right? And then make sure that who you're working for, who you're working with, you let them know that, okay, these are the things that I know, right? Because otherwise there's a communication gap, and then you're kind of, people are expecting you to know certain things, or they're wanting you to have something ready, and if you don't make it clear that, hey, I don't know this, which actually women are very bad at doing. Men will just straight up say, yeah, I don't know this. They're not afraid to say no. But women are very hard, it's very hard, or we'll just say, okay, yeah, I can do it, and then go back and be like, oh my God, what am I doing? And that's such a horrible feeling when you go back and you realize, oh my gosh, I had the chance to be like, I can't do this. Give it to Joe, because he knows. And just realizing that, and because it makes it so much easier in your day-to-day.
All right, one last question right here.
Hello, my name is Allie. First of all, thank you for your panel. It's fascinating. A couple words that come to mind, and I'm going to read this because I've been taking notes. You've seen me. Are apprenticeship and guild. And I don't know how many of you actually play games, and I know we were talking about not everyone gets into that, but World of Warcraft, etc. Over maybe centuries, right? You might think of woodworkers or stonemasons or whatnot, right? And they all learn their craft fairly young, and they're brought up in a tradition of such. They have mentors, they have guides, they have a peer group around them, and then they have their official apprenticeship, right? And then they go out and they're the professional themselves. And I see a huge parallel between tech, especially, so I was born in 1974, so do the math, you know how old I am. And I remember a time when it was okay for girls to walk around in dungarees and ride dirt bikes and all sorts of stuff, and then there was a time when it wasn't, like you were saying, and there's all sorts of media and psychological and et cetera that's rolled up into this, and there's way too much to talk about here, and I'd love to talk with all of you another time. I guess my question is, what role do you see changing paradigm of community playing? And I mean macro community, not micro community, not just tech, in women, and I'm gonna throw maybe more minorities on top of there too, going forward, because actually there's a White House report that came out in 2015, this is a follow-on, and you probably know what I'm talking about, that is talking about the STEM numbers going down even further than where they are now. And furthermore, the workforce in general changing to reflect a larger percentage of women and minorities at the same exact time when we're expecting those groups to bail on STEM. Houston, we have a problem. Austin, we have a problem, yes? So my question to you guys is, what role do you see community playing, formal or informal, in that? And you're probably going to answer.
The reason I wanted to answer that is when I decided to make the transition to tech, I actually lived in Chicago at the time. And I was looking for opportunities similar to what you talked about, to build experience. I knew, coming from the oil and gas industry, how important a resume was. I had connected with an opportunity in Austin called Girls Guild. They are a startup. Sadly, I'm not sure that they're still functioning, but wonderful vision. They were students at the Austin Center for Design, and so they had created an app around the concept of just what you were talking about. So it was connecting girls and women in the community, ages 13 and above. Some of the applications we would see were from ages 50 and 60 to makers in the community for apprenticeships. So what you're doing is you're trading skills and work, time, for learning. And wonderful concept, very well received by the community. It was only launched in Austin. One challenge that they saw and that I saw along with them, and I fast forwarded a little bit, let me rewind. So they were looking for an apprentice. They were looking for a few apprentices for a Ruby on Rails apprenticeship. And it was a 3-month apprenticeship. I had applied, and I told them if they did not accept me, I was going to show up at their doorstep anyway. I flew in for 3 months, every other weekend, to go to the apprenticeship. And that was a sacrifice I made to build my resume. But in that duration, what I learned from them, and really where my interest was the idea of apprenticeships and of tech apprenticeships, and how do you connect people to those types of opportunities. And so that's what really kept me there. You know, it became much more about the cause than the resume building. And so one of the challenges that they saw when trying to extend this to tech apprenticeships is time and money.
May I?
Mm-hmm.
You're referring to more formal apprenticeships, and one thing that I was inquiring about was the tendency for groups to form in foundational years, mentors to step up like her father did, and the peer group to just kind of hang around, right? And we don't see that very much with certain groups of girls.
See, I think that the problem is very similar though, and I think part of the problem is the commitment. I think when you are teaching tech skills, as several people in here would know, including Wei, is that it's not a one-time thing. It's a continuous commitment. It involves a lot of hours. It involves a lot of patience. And it involves a lot of your time. And I think that is absolutely a challenge for mentorships and apprenticeships is, you know, how do you find those hours? And in an industry where your time is money, it can be very challenging to create those things long term. You know, people have to see it as a cause, you know, much greater than themselves and a problem that they're trying to solve. And unfortunately, not everybody wants to or is capable of being that generous with their time. And one challenge I've seen specifically with females, and in fact this was a conversation that happened over Twitter, is a woman came back and she said, you know, it's really frustrating to be a female in tech. I'm expected to do well at my job, to take care of my home, to raise my kids, and to be a mentor in the community? Really? Men, you know, and she said, you know, men don't have that expectation. And it's really challenging because, yes, is it another thing, you know, to do? Is it another thing on the list? Is it another obligation? Absolutely. You know, it's really, it becomes a personal decision at that point. And I think that's why it can be more challenging to create those larger networks because, you know, be it male or female, as an adult, you have a lot of responsibilities. And to commit that kind of time can be really challenging.
Thank you. Okay, my live or not? Better? Okay, so I don't want to cut anybody short or anything, but I also don't want this conversation to end here. I think we've had a lot of great insight from our panelists today. Thank you all so much. This was amazing. But I do want to make sure that as a community and as people who are interested in coming to this panel, that we continue this conversation, that we make some concrete next steps so that we can actually help change some of these issues we talked about. So here are just a few of the things coming up. There are a ton of meetup groups in Austin. You know, we've talked about Women Who Code. That's fantastic. There's EdTech Women. There's Girl Develop It. There are mentorship opportunities for Girls Who Code. There are other student organizations that we can send out as well. But I just wanted to make it known that this is, we don't want this to stay in this room this night. We want to continue the conversation and definitely continue this momentum that we brought. And I think that Sean has something.
So I just wanted to add to the list of meetups. We do, for MakerSquare, we do have a meetup coming up this Friday that's on boot camps in general. And then also, you mentioned like a brunch and coding thing. That sounds really cool. There's a group at MakerSquare that just started a brunch and code Sunday workshop, interestingly. So, so there's that. But yeah, I got a bunch of emails in helping organize this, and one of the events is Girl Day at UT, which sounds really cool. If you just Google that, you can find it. And yeah, so there's lots of, I totally appreciate the comments and questions about community. I think communities are really important, and obviously you do too, or else you wouldn't be here. So I just want to thank everybody for first of all, for being here. I want to give a special thanks to our panel and to our moderators. So let's give them a round of applause. I love the conversation, and I want to give you guys an opportunity to converse amongst yourselves and with our panelists. I hope you all will stick around. We do have about 30 minutes. If you wouldn't mind, before you leave, take some trash with you and make sure that it finds a home, and that would be really helpful for me. So thank you all so much.
The trash can would be
and that would be the right. Thank you, Ali. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, thank you all. Yeah. Do you? Oh.
For if anybody is in video games, as a helper at a meetup called Brewing Games Austin, we're having a meetup in January 21st. So you can find it on Facebook.
Email that to me, and I will make sure everyone gets it. I'll send it out.
Women in games. Women in games.
Yeah, good job. Thank you for doing it.
I don't know. I'm gonna go talk to this group and I'm just leaving you guys for a conversation.
I don't know what they're doing. I have no idea.
I just give it up on
Okay. That's how I felt every time I looked over here. Oh, hi. Ashley, why are you? Cool, thanks for coming. Oh, you didn't tell her? Oh, thanks. I may have been talking about you as one of my encouraging teachers. Specifically that one time when I lost it. I was like, I'm out of here. Bye. I hate programming.
Well, I'm glad you stuck it out.
Oh, me too. I mean, there was no concern about me leaving, but it was just demoralizing at certain points.
A couple of those days.
Oh yeah. I mean, I still have them, just not quite like that.
Yeah, me too. You're just so
Yeah. I had a moment earlier today, and I was kind of talking about it. I spent hours working on this one thing, and I was I finally, sent him a message.